Most people think danger comes with sharp edges, loud alarms, and obvious threats. But the most lethal danger is quiet. It smiles at you, makes you feel safe, and slowly steals the parts of you that once burned with life. Comfort is not the harmless friend you think it is. It is the slow, velvet noose you place around your own neck, tightening one day at a time. It starts innocently. You choose what's familiar because it feels predictable. You avoid the conversation that might cause tension. You stay in the job that drains you because the pay arrives like clockwork. You keep the relationship that no longer inspires you because the loneliness outside it feels too vast to face. And each time, the mind applauds, "Good, stay where it's safe." But safety has a cost, and that cost is your becoming. Carl Jung understood this deeply. The human spirit does not grow in still waters. It expands in conflict, in challenge, in the friction between what you are and what you could be. Comfort dulls that friction until your days become indistinguishable, until the soul forgets what it means to stretch. The shadow, your untapped, unclaimed self, begins to wither, starved of the risks that would have brought it into the light. You may think comfort is the reward for survival, but what if it's the slow undoing of everything that makes you alive? Look around you. How many people are living on autopilot, their eyes dimmed, their voices flat? They are not victims of tragedy, but of comfort. They've traded the fire of uncertainty for the predictability of routine. And in doing so, they've traded possibility for permanence. The Stoics warned about this. Seneca wrote that it is not hardship that destroys us, but luxury that softens us into weakness. When every need is met too easily, the muscles of resilience decay. The mind becomes a servant to convenience. And before you realize it, you are no longer choosing comfort. Comfort is choosing you, trapping you in a cage so cushioned you stop trying to leave. And here's the truth your ego will resist. Comfort doesn't just keep you safe. It keeps you small. It tells you that your current life is good enough, so you stop reaching for the one that would set you ablaze. It whispers that the risk is too high. So you keep your dreams in the realm of imagination, where they can never fail, but also never live. You, reading this now, know there are things you've postponed because they would disturb the life you've settled into, people you haven't met because it would require vulnerability, roads you haven't walked because they start in uncertainty. And the longer you wait, the easier it is to believe you never truly wanted them in the first place. That's the most dangerous lie comfort tells, that the longing in your chest was just a passing thought and not the truth of who you are calling you home. But the calling doesn't vanish. It turns into restlessness, into late-night overthinking, into envy of those who dared. It becomes the subtle ache you can't name, the quiet dissatisfaction that shadows even your happiest days. Comfort hides the chains in silk, but chains they remain. There is a moment, and you will feel it when the cage begins to suffocate more than the unknown outside it. That moment is the hinge upon which your life can turn, but only if you are willing to step beyond the walls you've padded so well for yourself. When that moment comes, it rarely arrives with trumpets. It's quiet, almost unremarkable, a sigh in the middle of your workday, a flicker of boredom during a conversation you've had 100 times before, the sudden awareness that the life you're living feels like wearing someone else's skin. This is the first crack in comfort's illusion. The ego will rush to patch it. It will tell you that you're being ungrateful, that you have more than most, that wanting more is selfish. But this voice is not wisdom, it's fear. Fear that if you disturb the order of your life, you will lose the certainty that has kept you safe. Fear that if you reach, you will fail. Fear that if you see yourself clearly, you will no longer tolerate the excuses that have held you still. Comfort thrives on that fear. It wraps you in its soft arms and rocks you back into submission. It seduces you with the absence of friction. But friction is where you find yourself. It is where the untested parts of you are forced into action, where your shadow emerges, where your dormant courage is woken like a lion from sleep. The tragedy of comfort is not only that it kills ambition, it kills self-respect. Deep down, every human being knows when they are hiding from their own potential. You can dress it up with logic, call it stability or responsibility, but somewhere inside, a voice keeps asking, is this all? That voice is your undeveloped self, the part of you that refuses to believe this is the limit of your life. In Jungian terms, This is the moment when the unconscious begins to revolt. The shadow, all the desires, strengths, and truths you've banished, begins to leak into your awareness. Sometimes it shows up as irritability, sometimes as impulsive fantasies, sometimes as envy of those who dared to risk what you wouldn't. The shadow doesn't care about your comfort, it cares about your wholeness. And wholeness cannot exist inside the padded walls of stagnation. The Stoics would call this restlessness, a signal from nature itself. Life is motion. To resist growth is to resist the very force that animates you. Epictetus warned that chains are not always made of iron. Sometimes they're made of gold. They glitter, they feel valuable, but they still bind you. And here's what you need to understand. Escaping comfort will feel like loss at first. You will grieve the predictability, the easy rhythms, the feeling of knowing what tomorrow holds. You will question your sanity for leaving what worked. But growth has never been born in what works. It has been born in what challenges. You are not meant to rot in a life that feels safe but soulless. You are not meant to be embalmed in predictability while calling it peace. Peace without purpose is just sedation. And if you are honest with yourself, you will admit that sedation is exactly what comfort has given you. There will come a point where the fear of leaving will be outweighed by the fear of staying. And when that day arrives, you will understand that comfort was never your ally. It was the silent assassin of everything extraordinary you could have been. And when you finally see it for what it is, comfort loses some of its hold. The spell breaks, and the room you've been sitting in for years suddenly feels smaller, the air heavier. You begin to notice how your routines are not anchors, but chains. How the familiar faces around you speak in loops that keep you tethered to the same mental ground. What once felt like stability now tastes like stagnation. This is the awakening stage, subtle, yet irreversible. You cannot unsee what has been revealed. And yet, the next step is the hardest. Action. Because now you stand at the threshold between the life you've known and the one you could live. One side promises security, the other uncertainty. One side lets you rest in predictability. The other demands that you risk comfort for meaning. The ego will put on its finest disguise here. It will tell you that timing isn't right, that you need more preparation, that you must wait for the perfect conditions. But there is no perfect condition for transformation. There is only the moment you decide that fear will no longer dictate the terms of your existence. Jung would call this the confrontation with the self, the moment when the persona you've been wearing no longer satisfies the deeper truth of who you are. It is a death of sorts, the ending of a smaller identity to make room for a larger one. And like all deaths, it comes with grief. You will mourn the person who stayed safe. You will mourn the relationships that only worked because you stayed small. You will mourn the version of yourself who didn't yet know better. But mourning is part of the alchemy. The fire of discomfort burns away the excess, the false, the unnecessary. What survives is the raw core, the self that is unafraid to be seen in full light and full shadow. And that self cannot be birthed without first walking through the wilderness of the unknown. The Stoics understood this wilderness well. Marcus Aurelius spoke of the inner citadel, the fortress within that remains steady no matter what storms rage outside. But you cannot discover your citadel while never venturing beyond the gates. You must test it. You must face the moments that strip you of every external comfort so that you can feel, with bone-deep certainty, that your foundation is internal. When you choose growth over comfort, the world begins to reveal itself differently. Opportunities you never noticed before appear in your path, not because they weren't there, but because you weren't ready to see them. People shift, some vanish, unable to meet you in your new depth. Others arrive, drawn to the energy of someone who moves with purpose rather than fear. Still, you must be prepared. Leaving comfort will not make life easier. In fact, at first, it will make life harder. There will be nights you lie awake questioning if you've made a mistake. There will be days you ache for the ease of the old patterns. But the difference is this: now you ache in motion. Now your pain has direction. And that pain, unlike the numbness of comfort, is the sign of something alive growing inside you. It is here, in the tension between the known and the unknown, that your life begins to sharpen. And once you have tasted this sharpness, you will know it was never comfort you were seeking, it was freedom. Freedom is not the absence of difficulty, it is the presence of choice. And the woman or man who has stepped beyond the seduction of comfort begins to realize this with startling clarity. No longer bound by the silent agreements made in the name of security, they walk differently, not faster, not louder, but with an unshakable rhythm that comes from moving in alignment with their own truth. But freedom demands responsibility. When you can no longer blame the cage for your limits, the weight of your own decisions presses against your hands. This is where many falter, not because they want to return to comfort, but because they underestimate the discipline freedom requires. The absence of walls means the presence of endless paths, and without a clear inner compass, it's easy to wander aimlessly. Jung spoke of individuation as the process of becoming whole, a journey that requires you to integrate not only your light but also your shadow. And outside the safety of comfort, the shadow steps forward in full view. All the fears, insecurities, and unhealed wounds you once distracted yourself from now rise to the surface. The temptation here is to find a new comfort, a different cage disguised as progress, a relationship that feels exciting but keeps you dependent, a career move that seems bold but simply trades one set of chains for another. The Stoics would warn you here. Do not confuse motion with progress. Seneca wrote that, "To be everywhere is to be nowhere." Freedom is not about scattering yourself in all directions, but moving with deliberate intent. The real power is in choosing the difficult path when it is the right one, resisting the easy road when it leads you back to sedation. This is also where you begin to see the world with new eyes. You notice how much of society is built on the promise of comfort products, services, even relationships designed to keep people in a state of low-grade contentment, just satisfied enough not to revolt. You understand now why so few break free. The system rewards compliance with small doses of pleasure, enough to keep the hunger for more buried under routine. And yet, those who escape comfort discover something that the comfortable can't comprehend, that even struggle has beauty when it belongs to you. There is a sacredness in the work you choose for yourself, in the challenges you meet willingly, in the risks you take knowing they may not end in your favor. For even in failure, you stand taller than those who never left the safety of their padded walls. But the real shift happens inside. You begin to lose your taste for numbing. The distractions that once filled your evenings now feel like theft. Theft of your time, your focus, your life. You stop seeking validation in the eyes of those who live in comfort because you understand they cannot measure your path by their metrics. And slowly, without forcing it, your identity rearranges itself. You are no longer the one who dreams but doesn't act. You are the one who moves even when the outcome is uncertain. And perhaps this is the most dangerous thing about escaping comfort. Dangerous to the systems that thrive on your compliance. Dangerous to the people who relied on your passivity. Once you know you can survive without the safety net, you cannot be bought back into the cage, no matter how they dress it. The comfort-driven mind always whispers in gentle tones, promising that tomorrow will be the perfect day to act. But tomorrow is the sweetest lie it ever tells. In truth, comfort is not only a cushion, it is a sedative. And sedatives don't just make you rest, they make you forget who you were before you fell asleep. In the deep patterns of human psychology, Jung would have called this the unconscious pact, the silent agreement between your ego and your shadow to avoid the discomfort of growth. The ego says, "Let us remain here, in the known." The shadow replies, "Yes, because to step forward means I must be seen." This hidden conversation is the true prison. It isn't built from brick or iron, but from the small habits of avoidance, the tiny surrenders to fear that pile up into a wall higher than any mountain. Every day you stay within the lines. You tell the universe you are unwilling to redraw them, and the universe listens. It sends fewer challenges, fewer surprises, fewer moments of necessary friction. You think this is peace, but it is not. It is the stillness of water before it stagnates. It is the quiet of a field where nothing grows anymore. You have seen it in others, in the woman who once had fire in her voice, now speaking only in polite, diluted tones, in the man whose shoulders once carried ambition, now stooped beneath the weight of his own excuses. They are not defeated by some great enemy. They are smothered by the velvet hand of comfort. And the danger is that they do not notice the suffocation until it is too late. The Stoics knew this well. Seneca wrote that it is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste much of it. And what is comfort if not the most socially acceptable form of wasting life? The Romans trained their sons to bathe in cold rivers, to endure hunger, to walk miles in the heat, not because suffering was noble in itself, but because it sharpened the will against the slow decay of ease. And you, listening now, do you not feel it? The quiet pull of the soft bed when the alarm rings too early, the temptation to delay the difficult conversation, the choice to scroll instead of create. These are not harmless decisions. They are votes cast for the person you will become. Every small surrender to comfort is a seed. Plant enough of them, and they will bloom into a life you did not choose, one where your potential rots quietly beneath the soil, never breaking the surface. Comfort whispers that the world will wait for you, but the truth is, the world moves on. Your youth will not pause. Your dreams will not survive on starvation rations. Your soul will not forgive you for betraying it with safety. The longer you wait, the more alien the idea of change becomes. Until one day, the prison doors could stand wide open and you would not walk through them because the outside would feel too wild, too sharp for your softened senses. The antidote is not to despise comfort, but to ration it, as one rations a precious spice. Enough to restore, never enough to dull the hunger. This requires the courage to disturb the stagnant pond of your daily existence, to stir up the silt until the water runs clear again. And that courage is born not from wishing, but from deliberate confrontation with the cold, with the unknown, with your own untamed shadow. And so, the moment comes when a man or woman must decide: remain wrapped in the warm lullaby of the familiar, or rise into the bracing wind of the unknown. This is the threshold, the sacred crossing that Jung saw as the gateway to individuation. Here, the self is no longer content to play the role the ego rehearsed. Here, the shadow is not feared, but invited to walk beside you. Its once threatening darkness, now a source of power and clarity. The Stoics taught that the good life is not one free from hardship, but one lived in harmony with reason and courage. Marcus Aurelius would remind himself each morning, you will meet resistance, loss, discomfort, and you will remain unbroken. This was not an affirmation meant to soothe. It was an armor meant to prepare. Discomfort ceases to be a predator when you learn to hunt it first. When you break the addiction to comfort, something strange happens. Time returns to you. You no longer sleepwalk through hours, days, years. You begin to feel each moment as raw material in your hands, malleable, responsive. You take cold showers, not because they are pleasant, but because they remind you what it feels like to choose difficulty. You speak the truth you've been avoiding, not because it guarantees a favorable outcome, but because it cleanses the soul of cowardice. You do the work before the inspiration, because you understand that inspiration respects movement more than intention. The man who is broken with comfort walks differently. His gaze is steadier, not because he knows what tomorrow will bring, but because he knows that whatever it brings, he can meet it head on. The woman who has rejected stagnation carries herself with a quiet gravity, as though she has seen storms most would run from, and instead, she learned to dance in the rain. When you live this way, you discover a paradox. Comfort is sweetest, not when it is constant, but when it is rare, earned, and fleeting. A warm bed feels divine after a day of exertion. A meal tastes sacred after hunger. Rest becomes what it was always meant to be, a celebration after battle, not a substitute for living. The past loses its grip. The future loses its intimidation, and the present becomes a terrain of possibility. You stop bargaining with your life, waiting for the right time, because you understand there is no right time, there is only now. And the more willingly you step into the raw edge of existence, the more the world reveals its hidden doors. One day, you will look back and see the distance you have traveled from that soft prison. You will feel no bitterness toward the version of you who lingered there, only gratitude, because without knowing the numbness of comfort, you could never have felt the electricity of being fully alive. And you will know in your bones that the purpose of life was never to remain safe, but to burn brightly, to spend yourself fully, to meet the end not preserved, but spent and smiling. Step out, step forward, step into the discomfort until it becomes your second home. Life is not waiting, it's already moving. Move with it.